Welcome to the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Sager, and I'm dedicated to covering common legal issues for small business owners and just how some of the world's most elite entrepreneurs have handled legal issues themselves. In true attorney fashion, the information in this episode is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only, and you should always consult with your attorney before implementing any of the information. Now, on to the show. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Legalpreneur Podcast. Today's guest is an absolute beauty, badass, you name it. She does it all. She's had multiple businesses, and of course, you'll find out her legal downfall, which I'm so grateful because she is so open about all of it. So today's guest is actually Harriette Hale. She has had an amazing $1 million comeback from a $250,000 legal nightmare. Specifically, we talk about how underestimating the importance of contracts left her vulnerable to severe theft. And this story is so crazy. Like, I can't believe she had to go through this, but I'm so happy for Harriette because she has come out on top and she is just absolutely killing it in her current business. So make sure you stay tuned for all of it. You're also going to learn about Harriette's business, and of course, always go follow her on Instagram at Harriette Hale. The spelling and link is in the show notes. But before we get to today's episode, couple of things. Number one, make sure you send me a text. I want to be able to text you guys. Let me know, like, what do you want to hear on the podcast? You know, what do you want to learn about? What do you want to know? Send the word podcast to 832-225-3164. And you will also be informed about giveaways and any types of awesome promotions. Alrighty, on to today's episode. Welcome to the show, Harriette Hale. I'm so excited that you are here. I know the listeners are in for a real treat because I know that you have multiple very successful businesses. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And let's go ahead and get started and just kind of tell the listeners like where you've been, what you've done, what has led you to where you are at this point in your career.
Okay, so my name's Harriette. I am a life and business coach of the spiritual sort. So I brand myself as a high priestess of light. But I'm a multi-business owner. So I first set up my first company in my teens, which was a music agency. And then I went on to set up a music school, followed by a record label, a music management company, then a dance and yoga studios, and then my coaching business, which is the one that I'm supposed Instagram famous for, if you like. It's the one I'm publicly known for. And I think it's through the coaching business that I met you, Andrea. My business timeline goes back about nearly 14 years now. I set up my first company nearly 14 years ago. So I've been doing this dance for a while.
That's awesome. That's pretty amazing. So I'm curious, like when you're a teenager, what made you start a music agency?
Honestly, I'm not very good at being told what to do. So
aren't we all?
I think most entrepreneurs struggle with that. The whole 9 to 5 job thing just never really appealed to me. And I tried it. Honestly, I did. I just wasn't very good at it. And I could just naturally, intuitively, creatively, I could just see other ways to make better money. So that's just what I decided to do. And I suppose being a teenager, you're just a little bit more fearless. So I just kind of jumped in head first without really knowing things, which, you know, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of legal ones, which I'm sure we'll touch on. It did get me onto that entrepreneurial track quite young. So I got a real taste for it from being a teenager.
I love that. And I think you're so right about being more fearless when you're a teenager because you're naive in a sense of, I'm not going to say the real world, but you're naive as to a lot of the world because you're not as experienced, but that naivety really makes you brave and, like you said, fearless. So I love that you just jumped right in. And I'm the same exact way. I am coming up on 2 years of having my law firm. And quite frankly, this is by far the longest I've ever been employed or stuck with one thing. Any job that I ever had, I think I didn't have it any longer than like 6 months. 7 months.
Wow.
So I'm just like you. We're just unemployable. We like to call the shots.
Yes, exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So let's take it back. And for the listeners, Harriette informed me before we hopped on that lawyers are not called lawyers in the UK. They're called solicitors.
Yeah.
So, Harriette, can you tell me, since you started your business, your first business as a teenager, what was your first experience with a solicitor?
The first kind of, I suppose, real legal overhead, like the first time I invested quite heavily in attorneys, was when I took on a commercial premises in the centre of London. That was when I set up my music school. So that was actually my second business. I took on a huge, great big commercial building, which required a lease and change of use and all kinds of things that just kind of went straight over my head. So I remember investing quite heavily in legal help then to ensure that the building was sound and safe and the lease was all above board with the landlord and that we had the correct commercial usage for the building. And then I did a little bit with HR legal to sort out staff contracts and things like that. That one went badly wrong. There's a horrible story behind that.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think that over the years I've used solicitors or attorneys, lawyers for intellectual property, for licensing, HR, legal, even just setting up a company in the UK. You don't have to use a solicitor, but it's advisable to have it all done properly, and above board. I've consistently used legal support throughout my 14 years, and I learned from my mega mistake to use legal now as a preventative measure rather than a reactive measure.
And then that's really important. And that's something that I tried to get across to the listeners. You can definitely be proactive and spend less money being proactive instead of being reactive and spending probably 10, 20, 50 times more than you would have if you were proactive. Can we dive into, I guess what you said was had gone horribly wrong? Was it HR you said?
Yes, it was. It was HR. Well, I mean, it was a bit HR. It was a bit of a compete situation. Basically, in my music school, when I was a few years into running that music school, I became mentally ill, I suppose. I was in a narcissistic abusive relationship, which is a whole other legal battle, but that's personal rather than professional. And because I was suffering with my mental health, I kind of stepped away from the business for a while and went into voluntary therapy and left the business in the hands of my senior management team and thought at the time that I could trust them, that they would run the business, that it would all be fine, that I would come back from my mental health break and I would just walk straight back into my business. And I was very naive in that respect because I didn't actually have my senior management team in employment contracts and I didn't have them in non-compete contracts either, because technically they were all self-employed. I literally only had my administrative staff, what we call PAYE. I'm not sure if it's the same over there, but basically like a set employment contract. And all of my creative management team, they were all self-employed. So they weren't contracted to me in any way, shape, or form. So I basically left the business in the hands of 3 people on the premise of trust. And that doesn't stand up in court. So what happened when I came back from my mental health break, I found that they had completely swiped my client database. They'd swiped my intellectual property. They'd taken all of my music syllabuses, all my music students, parents, everything. And they'd set up a competing company half a mile away, literally down the road. So, of course, I freaked, I panicked. I mean, I was in a very vulnerable place anyway because my mental health, I'd done a couple of months in therapy and I was kind of coming out the other side of this domestic abuse situation that I was in. I mean, poor form on them for taking advantage of me at such a vulnerable time, but that's probably a different conversation. So yeah, I came back and basically didn't have a business to come back to. I'd lost everything. My clients had disappeared. They'd been coerced into joining this other music school under the guise that it was actually me that was setting up this secondary music school. So they'd used my name, they'd used my material. Literally, they used everything. They just copycatted me and set up. So I went to my solicitor in a panic, as you would, and he looked into it and straight away he said, Harriette, I'm really sorry, but you don't have non-compete clauses in place. They're not even in contracts. Legally, they are actually allowed to do this. We could maybe go after them for intellectual property because it should be fairly easy to prove that your music syllabuses, your music content, all the stuff that you have been teaching your students for years is that's your creative output. And if we can get students to back that up, then we can stop your now competitors, ex-employees, from teaching that. But we can't stop them trading. We can't get your students back. We can't get your clients back. And we can't even sue them for what they've done. You're going to have to start from scratch. And that is literally what I did. And it was a horrible lesson to learn, because I then plummeted over the next year into nearly $250,000 worth of debt.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. I can't even imagine how you were feeling trying to improve your mental health and then coming out and actually getting through that and then coming back to a business that was essentially just wiped out from underneath you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was horrendous. It was definitely one of the most challenging times in my life. It has turned into my comeback story. So if you go onto my Instagram, you will see from 250,000 in debt to 1 million in 3 years. And that is what I did. I wiped out the debt. I got myself back on my feet. I then set up several other companies, the ones that I mentioned before. And within 3 years, I declared myself a self-made millionaire. So there was a lot of light to come out of it, and it forced me down my own spiritual self-development path that I perhaps wouldn't have gone down otherwise. But in hindsight, I learned my lesson, and I wrap everything up so tight in legal binds now. Everything's got a document, a contract attached to it, because it's not worth the fallout and it's not worth the heartache. And financially, it completely screwed me over. I lost everything.
Wow. I mean, your comeback story is amazing. I commend you for actually, because most people would have just rolled over at that point and said, whatever, I'll just sit here for the rest of my life and feel sorry for myself, or just go get a regular 9-to-5 job. But you're like, no, I'm going to make a comeback and, I'm going to kill it. And you are absolutely killing it. So I'm curious, is that music school still in business?
It is, and it's more successful than ever.
Wow.
Their music school, the competing music school, they didn't even last a year. Karma's a bitch.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to say it, but you said it for me. So yes. I can imagine how hard that period of time was for you, but I'm glad that you came out on the other side. I mean, I know there are things that you could have done to prevent what happened back then, but you were young. Do you think just having the contracts in place back then would have helped the situation? Or do you think it was just not having a solicitor part of your business even more that would have helped? Or do you just think it was kind of something inevitable? What do you think?
Yeah, you know me, you know how spiritual I am. So I play into destiny's hands anyway. I think when big life-changing events are meant to happen, they will happen, whether they're legal, financial, domestic, personal, whatever they are. It was definitely one of those life pivoting moments, but I think it would have been avoided if I'd taken legal advice to begin with, but it never even occurred to me to have a solicitor or attorney or lawyer, whatever, look at my business and say, oh, here's a legal trap, here's where you could fall out, here's where potential problems could arise. It never occurred to me to have someone like on my team in that regard. And it was the solicitor who helped me through that situation as much as he could, as much as we couldn't sue, as much as I couldn't get my money back. I got very close with a solicitor, his name's Tom, who then helped me to put the correct contracts in place as I started building the company back up, and he started helping me to protect my intellectual property. He and I have since become long-term friends. I went to his wedding, he's coming to mine. We both had kids around the same time, and he's become a central part of the company, almost on like a retainer basis. And when I say the company, I mean the umbrella of all the companies, because there are several. But he's my go-to person for, oh, hey, Tom, can you run your eyes over this? Can you glance over this? Is this something you can help with? And listen, he's not an expert in every area of law, but just having someone on my team, on my side, who speaks the legal language, like really knows how the law works and can forecast where I might trip up, is invaluable. And even if he can't actually act on something or advise on something himself, he'll put me in touch with someone who can. And that, for me, to feel that supported and to feel that protected, that's done wonders for my mindset, for my energy, for the businesses, for then the bank balance, the impact that I make on the world. It has a knock-on effect with my clients. honestly, having that level of support is a game changer. And I wish I'd have known it back then. But I think whether you look at it as I was young or I was still fairly early stages of my business, whichever angle you want to play it, I didn't want to spend the money on legal
Yeah.
because I didn't see the value in it. You know, and you could say, oh, it's because I was in the early stages of my business, I didn't see the value. You could say, oh, it's because I was young, I didn't see the value. But either way, I didn't see the value. And I really wish I'd have known the value of it back then the way I do now.
I want to really point out and harp on what you said. It never occurred to you that you need a legal. And that's exactly what probably 90% of the people listening, it has never occurred to them. And that's why I wanted to start this show, is to help business owners avoid what happened to you and what happened to, every other entrepreneur that's been on this show. When you're starting out, all you see is dollar signs, but you have to realize those can all be taken away from you if you don't take the necessary steps to protect your business. And the way that you work with Tom, that's exactly how I work with my clients. Like, I want to be that go-to for them. And I don't just want to, do this project and be done. Like, I really want to take a full comprehensive approach, protect their business as a whole, and not just do a little piece here or there. And that's why we have the Legalpreneur, which is our all access pass. That is how we work hand in hand with our clients, helping them foresee legal issues, helping them with their contracts, making sure they're not signing their life away, making sure they're not giving up their business. Like, I just had a contract that I reviewed and edited yesterday. The client has a CBD company. They're wanting to distribute, in a different country. And essentially the other party was trying to take the company from her in this contract. And I was like, no.
Wow.
Yeah. And she had no idea. She was like, well, we discussed this and they put this in the contract. And I was like, no, you are not signing this contract, at least not until I completely revamp this. And then that's another thing to be aware of, listeners. Even if you discuss terms with somebody and then something else is written, you hear it all the time. Make sure you get it in writing. Make sure you get it in writing. Because guess what? If you discuss those terms and then you write something down and you sign it, whatever you discussed verbally is out the window. Whatever's on paper, that's what matters.
Absolutely. That's really nice that you have that kind of all-round preventative, proactive approach. Because, yeah, you're just foreseeing the potential pitfalls for them. And like you said before, they can be so expensive. In my case, $250,000 expensive.
Yes. So are you saying $250,000, that's how much debt you were in because of people that worked for you or because of the attorney fees?
I mean, there were legal fees, yes, but I had to, because I was in the lease for that building, so my music school was in the building, I still had to maintain my lease payments, I had to pay my business rates, I had to pay utilities, I still had to pay my insurances. My overheads were $120,000 just to switch the light on. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a huge building. It's a beautiful building. I adore it. It's still standing. It's still running. It's a hub of so much, creativity and education. It's amazing, but it's bloody expensive to run. So when you've got no clients to cover those costs, you go into debt very, very, very quickly. And because I was having to take out loans to cover the costs, I was then racking up interest. And then there was legal things on top of that. And then there was advice, like accountancy advice on top of that. I was taking advice from a lot of legal people, a lot of accountants, and everybody did say, go bankrupt, get a 9-to-5 job, you'll be fine. And I'm very grateful to myself. The only sensible bit of advice I gave myself back then was, nope, I'm going to be a comeback story. I'm going to somehow figure this all out. Everybody thought I was crazy. Perhaps I was, but
it paid off.
It did pay off. But I tell you what, I wouldn't ever want to repeat that. As much as it was an amazing comeback story and it, my stubbornness and my persistence did pay off, it's not ever an experience that I'd ever want to repeat, which is why, I fully subscribe to legally wrapping everything up in life and in business. Because it's just not worth a headache. Unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, our planet is governed by laws. And those laws are there to support you if you give them the respect and attention that they deserve. But I think a lot of business owners just kind of dismiss it as something they don't need to worry about until they're big time. But I didn't even get the chance to be big time before it brought me down.
So I'm curious, how did you then get into the spiritual space and get to where you are today? What was kind of like your trajectory there?
So I think initially my stubbornness, my stubborn streak was like, I've built it up once before, I can do it again. How difficult can it be? Like, I've done it once, I'll just do it again. And I was trying all the same marketing hacks and like the same hustle mentality. And I was working like 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Like, I was gung ho to really get myself back up where I'd just fallen from. And it just wasn't working. So about 6 months down the line, I think I had some kind of like come to Jesus moment. And I was like, this isn't working. I'm burning out. I'm exhausted. I've got no social life. I've got no money. I've got no clients. I've got no inspiration. I've got no creativity. And surely to God, this isn't what it's meant to feel like. I need to try something different. And then I can't now remember if somebody mentioned something to me. Probably not, because I didn't have a social life, let's be honest. I wasn't talking to anyone. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I scrolled past something on Facebook, but I discovered Kundalini yoga and I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. So I found myself on this Kundalini yoga mat, like trying to immerse myself in these new spiritual ways and having mad resistance to it and honestly feeling like a bit of an idiot. I don't know if you remember your first yoga experience, but everyone feels like a bit of a clown when they first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in that space, but for whatever reason, I think it shifted my energy enough. Like, it was just something new enough for me to grasp onto that I kept going back to it. And then I got quite friendly with my teacher, and he started introducing me to energy healing and energy attunements and psychic download. And loads of people kept saying to me, you're definitely psychic. You're definitely psychic. And I was like, no, that's rubbish. There's no way I'm psychic. Anyway, long story short, I started really trying to develop it, and I found teachers all over the world. And as the business built its way back up, I really started to pursue my spiritual path. And the two kind of went hand in hand, and I ended up flying all over the world to see loads of different teachers. And before I knew it, I initiated as a priestess. I am definitely psychic, but I'm psychic clairvoyant. I'm a priestess, divine channel for source, energy healer, energy alchemist, energy reader. And I've kind of blended all of my spiritual energy tools into my other businesses, into the music school, into the dance studios, and really made them abundant, creative, inspiring places to be, businesses that, support the community around them. And then off the back of that, started my coaching company and my healing company and helping other people do the same, really. And it's amazing. And do you know what? All that spiritual stuff works hand in hand with all the legal stuff. It has to be said. They support each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I work with a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs and I love hearing their journeys, especially how they got there, because everybody has a unique story.
Yeah. And I think, do you know what? For me, I had to go through an emotional breakdown in that narcissistic abusive relationship, and then go through a professional business and financial breakdown with what happened with the music school for me to just really have that come to Jesus moment. I hit rock bottom. I was broken in every way a woman can be broken, I suppose, emotionally and spiritually, financially. My trust was broken. I was in a really, really dark place, but it's usually in the darkest of places that we start to find the light, so they say. And yeah, the journey back up was one hell of a comeback story.
No, I love that. My husband and I have a similar story because we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, or right outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, and we just were at our lowest point. We were not happy. And we finally just had our, come to Jesus, come to each other moment and had that talk like, we're not happy where we are. We have to make a change. So we just picked up, moved across the country, and we have been writing our comeback story ever since. So
I love that.
Right there with you. Okay, so to wrap this up, can you give us one business tip? And this is something that I ask all of my guests, and I have a feeling that this is going to be a really good one. Like the business tip, like if you had to leave your mark with one business tip, what would it be?
I suppose if I'm going to leave one, I'd say get your energy right. Because your energy fuels your mindset, your energy fuels your creative inspiration, your energy fuels your decision and the choices that you make and your behavior and the way you interact with other people and what you create and how you contribute. So if your energy's right, then by rights, everything else is right. And when I say get your energy right, I mean, make sure that there's enough self-care in your day-to-day, that you're really taking care of yourself and that your cup is fully filled up, and that you're in a positive mindset space, and that you've got a good balance in your life, and that you've got a positive self-talk in your head, and that, you're doing whatever you can to keep yourself healthy in mind, body, and soul. because your energy is the thing that you put out into the universe, and ultimately the universe will reflect back to you exactly where your energy's at. So if it's vibey, high, conscious, abundant, grounded, and inspired, then that's the life and business that you're going to build for yourself.
That's beautiful. I love that. I am so glad I got to ask you that question. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Harriette Hale, and let us know where to find you.
Sure. Instagram is probably the best place. That's where I'm like active in my DMs, and I'm actually showing up and, you know, just sharing inside my life. So you can go to @Harriette Hale, or you can just type into the search on Instagram, Ask Harriette, because that's what the coaching company is just Ask Harriette. And then on there, you'll find my website, and you can DM me, and you can watch my stories, and you can see my baby girl, and all the fun things.
She's adorable. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we were able to make this happen. And listeners, make sure you go check her out on Instagram. I would love for you to share this to your stories. Let us know what you enjoyed most about the show. I know that there's a lot that I really enjoyed about Harriette's story. So let us know what you like the most, and I will chat with you next time. If you found this information helpful, I would be so grateful if you could share it with a fellow business owner. And it doesn't cost anything to rate, review, or subscribe to the show. Your support helps me reach more listeners, which allows me to support more business owners in their entrepreneurial journey. I'll see you next episode.